Hello and welcome to the Soft Cover, our online venue where we launch nonfiction books. My name is Prasanna, and today we have with us Manish Gaekwad, who is a journalist and a writer. He's written Lean Days, a novel, and The Last Courtesan, a memoir. But today we are discussing a very special book, which can be called the sequel to The Last Courtesan, and it is called Nautch Boy. He documents the author's experiences growing up as a feminine child in a kotha and his relationship with his mother, the courtesan Rekhabai. Welcome to the print, Manish.
Thank you, Prasanna. It's my first time and I'm a little nervous, so please be kind to me.
Yeah, of course. It's a sort of a sequel to The Last Courtesan, right?
Yes.
And I think The Last Courtesan begins with a dream of sorts where uh, you sort of contemplate killing your mother. And this book begins with um, the mother contemplating killing the child. Could you tell us what
Yes.
went behind that choice?
So, at some point of time in your life, when your parents get on your nerves, you sometimes have that thought that, oh my God, I wish I could kill them. You don't mean it, but you're just venting it in anger or frustration about something. And this is something that happens to you mostly when you are in your teenage years, when you're rebellious, um, and then you move on. So but that's a thought that I've had. Of course, I've had a couple of times in when I was growing up. But when I was writing the book, I didn't have a formal introduction to the last courtesan. It started right away with my mother telling her story, but my publisher and agent decided that we should have an introduction. And for me, an introduction line is always at the back of my mind when I'm writing about my mother. I'm always sort of competing with Camus' first line in The Rebel. Mother died today, or tomorrow, or something like that. Mother died today or yesterday, I don't know.
Okay.
Something like that. And that line always stayed with me, and I always thought, how could I better that line? But eventually, over the years, when I started writing, I made peace with the fact that I would probably not be able to better that line. But when when the story happened, I thought I might as well say it in my own style. And so, and you need a hook line, I suppose, in a book to get the reader started.
Yeah.
So I started with that. So, but when I wrote Notch Boy, I used the event from her life where she actually did have that thought very seriously.
Mm.
And so I used that line again as a hook line, but to connect it to the last courtesan. So in a way,
Yeah.
if you read this one independent of that, or if you read that, then it will connect to this.
And what was different this time around? That was your first time writing a memoir, and this one too. So many parts have to have been similar, many experiences. So how much does Notch Boy share with the Last Courtesan, and what is different in the book as well as your experience of writing it?
Apart from an umbilical cord that you can't snap off with your mother, the
Yeah.
both the books are connected in that sense. Uh, our lives are so entwined that at times it's difficult to separate those experiences because she's narrating her story from her point of view, and I have an alternate point of view about that very same event.
Yeah.
So, but that's then one tends to be. Um, I think I've written it from a very distant an observation that I've made getting out of that comfortable relationship of mother and son, and looking at it from a journalist's point of view, being detached,
Yeah.
and then being able to tell that story uh, from there.
And the last courtesan, of course, began its life. I think it's mentioned in Nautch Boy as well. It began its life with a conversation with a writer, I think a non Indian writer, who was confused about the difference between a tawaif and a sex worker. So, where did Nautch Boy begin its life?
You know, Prasanna, the thing with Nautch Boy is initially it was just one chapter in the Last Courtesan. It was the closing chapter of Last Courtesan. It was just one chapter. But while I was writing it, I realized that my voice and her voice are so different from each other. And I realized that I'm approaching my story with a lot more craft, with a lot more literary allusions, with a lot more reference to cinema, poetry,
Yeah.
art, So, and I felt like if I just limit it to one chapter in The Last Courtesan, then it'll be insufficient to tell this boy's story. So I went and met the editor Swati Chopra at HarperCollins in Delhi, and I said, "Can we split this into another book?" And she loved the idea, and she said, "Yeah, it'll work like a sequel." So then we went and conceived Nautch Boy.
Uh, and now, a question about the Tawaif culture. At different points, you've mentioned how Tawaif culture is not how movies show it. It's not how it's shown in Umrao Jan, not Pakiza, certainly, not Mandi, not Gangubai. But do you think any of these films have been able to capture some reality of the quota? If there's one film or a series that has managed to show the reality of a quota,
I think Mandi and Sardari Begum are closer to the truth uh, in portraying the women just as they are, and the environment just as it is, without uh, turning it into a grand set which looks like something that happened in the 18th and 19th century, when it was patronized by the Nawabs and prince,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
princes and courts and all. So cinema tends to look at the wife culture and the mujra from a very ancient point of view, which is been over, which has been over for a very long time. Uh, they've
Yeah.
not they've not actually visited kothas uh, with a willingness to depict it how it is, but instead they tend to get their references from previous films.
Yes.
So their reference is only cinema; it's not real life.
Yeah, yeah,
So, and of course, films tend to exaggerate things for entertainment,
yeah,
and there is nothing wrong in doing so. Uh, it's only when it turns into a caricature, a stereotype, a cliche, then it becomes a bit of a problem. Because if you can portray um, other people
yeah.
in a more real, in a more authentic manner, then what about the vibes?
Yes. And uh, do you think the Tawaif culture is truly dead?
Yes, yes.
When would you point the moment where it died?
I think it was around the mid 90s, around the time of the Bombay bomb blast and the Calcutta bomb blast, because these were the two
Yes.
main centers for the Tawaif culture, which was at its fag end at that time. Uh, and because of the bomb blast, especially in Calcutta, which was in the Kotha district, a lot of Tawaifs just
Yeah.
got up and left, uh, and never returned. So what happened is by that time the Tawaifs were also entering dance bars, uh, to look for work because the patrons had stopped coming to the kothas and they wanted disco. They didn't want a tumri and a
Yeah.
khayal. So now the wives have stepped out of the kotha to look for work, and they enter dance bars, and that's how the profession completely ends from one style to getting into sort of a sleazy, shady business of
Mhm.
sometimes soliciting sex, and then it
Yeah.
gets turned into you know something something that we now think of as sex work.
Yeah. And you mentioned Sapna Chaudhary, who you liken to some aspects of Tawaif culture. In some form, I think you mean to say that the courtesan does live on. Uh, but
Yes,
do you think that the Tawaif actually lives on in women like Chaudhary and in just them, if at all?
I would say yes. I mean, it is carrying the tradition forward in a more modern sense, whether it's
Yeah.
the dance bar or whether it's the whether it's Sapna on stage or whether it's even in cinema. There, it has borrowed so much from the wives and it's moved on to adapt to modern times and how it's for example um, not the singing so much but the dancing at least has moved out of the quotas into all the other places whether it's an item number in a film,
Yeah.
it it draws so much reference from what the wives were dancing to in the quotas.
Yes. I,
Maybe now it's on a faster beat and it's a more upbeat tempo, but
of course.
the stylistic references are of course from there.
Yeah. I think it's Ruth Vanita who says that she calls it Bombay cinema, not Bollywood. But she says that the courtesan figure was central to Bombay cinema. That's what it's one of the defining features of Bollywood films, of Hindi films. So it also, in some way, preserved classical culture through Thumris. Uh, so then, would you say that not Indian, would you say that Bombay cinema and by extension art in North Indian centers like Lucknow, Delhi, or even Mumbai and Kolkata, that they've lost after the loss of the wife culture?
um, I mean, there are no more quotas, so obviously that's a big loss the to the culture. Cinema, if you look from the very beginning, a lot of courtesans were in making films, producing, directing, acting,
Yes.
uh, composing music, writing lyrics. All of that was done by a lot of courtesans in the past. Um, Most famous example would be Nargis's mother.
Yeah.
It's a long tradition that uh, has been going on, but by the 80s, I think it wrapped up. In the 1980s is when the complete decline of the quotas was happening and it
Hmm.
wrapped up. And from then on, there is no way to sort of revive it exactly how it was, but
Yeah.
uh, but it does, show up in cinema more often than we.
Yes.
So the agency of the women doing item numbers in cinema is dependent on it's a collaborative work between the filmmaker and the
Yeah.
the actor and the choreographer. So that's a performative piece that's being done with everybody's agreement, I suppose. How much to go, how much not to go, you know. So yeah, there is agency in that as well.
I had, growing up watching these movies, imagined a kotha as a space where queerness could exist and be accepted. But reading the book, I've realized that that is the farthest thing from the truth. It is not a space where um, queerness, at least if it is tolerated, it's not accepted, I think, is what that is the phrasing that you used. Uh, where do you think the um, lack of acceptance for queerness comes from in a kotha, which is a place of desire? It is at the margins. It is where one imagines a queer person would go to find a place for themselves.
So you're right. It's tolerated but not accepted because as the courtesan grows older and perhaps feels the need after, let's say, retirement to settle down with a man, then she allows the patron to dictate to her what is right and what is not,
Which
because
is similar
she
to
is.
what happens in with what did happen in your life with
Yeah,
uh, yeah, the entry of Mr. Kothari, I think.
yes, yes. So she's then compromising to sort of enter mainstream society as this retired person who used to have a career as a performer or an artist. So so then what happens is, then the man will tell her what is right and what is wrong. So then his opinion colors hers, and that is how she begins to see the world around her. Then and then it has to change to suit his taste.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as the courtesan is in the quota with other women, yes, they are free, they are liberated, they are independent, they are open minded about queerness. But I think it gets affected the more and more they allow men into that fold.
So the outside does infect the kotha.
It does. Maybe not in the beginning, but eventually it does.
Yeah.
It does. And kind of
Uh,
breaks down the quota system, and it leads to the women choosing then to move out of the quota and go and live with a man in some suburban
yeah.
location as his mistress. And so therefore then you're reforming the in some ways you're reforming the disreputable illicit woman into a
Mm-hmm.
domestic housewife who will then who will then uh, start treating her children in a certain way which is
Yeah.
supposed to be acceptable in society.
Yeah. And it happens along the lines of parenthood. There's gender, class, sexuality. How do you think violence shapes life in general, and how do you think violence has shaped you growing up as a queer boy in a kotha?
I mean, my birth was a violent act.
Yes.
So I think I've just it's in my blood to to see so much violence from the very beginning, whether it's that hazy memory, first memory of her having a scuffle with a ruffian in a kota where her finger gets slashed,
Mm,
to
yeah.
the to her telling me about the fires that burnt, or or the room that I was trapped in where she had to break the door to get me out. So, violence has always been a part of my physical and mental makeup in that sense. But I think it was my mother, or it was just me thinking that uh, I hope this violence does not teach me to be violent. I hope it teaches us to be non violent. So that is perhaps my learning or understanding from it. And at every stage in my life, whenever there was violence, I did not treat it back with violence, because
Yeah.
I think I was smart enough or clever enough to understand that it will only harm me more. So I might as well. let it pass, and not come back to it with a slasher knife and do something wrong about it.
Yes. And I had planned this to be my first question, and I think it will be my last. Why the title, which is a term that is often used as a slur against queer boys? Why choose that term? Why choose Nautch Boy as the title for the book?
So when the British were ruling India, they when they were looking for entertainment, they would they would get somebody to ask the tawaifs to come and entertain them, and those girls were called Naach girl,
Mm, yeah,
because they were naachne wali, and so they
yeah,
translated them as Naach girl. So, and because they couldn't pronounce Naach with their accent, they sort of called it Notch. They corrupted the word to Notch, and it kind of became like a slur and an insult. And this one is a Notch girl, and somebody who's not proper for society. So when we then this term became antiquated, and then when I was writing uh, the book, I went. I thought about in the past how I was always called Nachkaiya, which is
mm, yeah,
another corruption of Nachne Wali, or Nachaniya, which the girls are called. So it's sort of like making fun of us. But as a queer person, I think you learn to embrace it and own it and flaunt it and show off.
yeah.
It's
And
like it's like that T-shirt that was very famous at one point. हाँ हूँ मैं तो.
yeah, yeah. And actually, final question. You say in the book, the boy begins as uh, an effeminate little child who enjoys dressing up, who enjoys putting on a performance, who really admires his mother's sequin saris and her makeup, and even calls Sri Devi his on screen mother. And then, as the boy goes to a boarding school, he sort of chips away at that and also realizes that he has cut off a lot of a lot of the femininity in him. uh, my question to you is, have you been able to access that effeminate child again?
When I'm alone, when I'm with myself privately, if I break into a song and dance and channel into my feminineness, femininity, I guess I'm there. Uh, but I have to accept the fact that we live in a largely heteronormative world, which is 90% of our world is sees everything in a certain way, and
Yeah,
uh, and I have to live with that. And no matter what freedoms we get from the courts and from the laws, uh, every individual person uh, cannot suddenly change overnight. It'll take a
yeah,
while for everybody to accept, and because they don't accept, and I don't want to be seen as a form of ridicule. Uh, so I guess uh, that training in school kind of conditioned me to be a certain way, to accept myself a certain way, to get rid of all my feminineness. Uh, but I think I I still hold on to it in some ways. I've not
yes.
entirely let it go. Uh, Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manish.
Yeah.